Great. All right. Welcome back to what has to be the 7th, 8th, 9th YouTube video, probably, if you're watching at home, for the House Government Operations and Military Affairs Committee. Here it is after 4 on Tuesday, March 14th, and we are going to do something completely different. We're going to take up what I hope is a short little bill, H-178. And I'd like to first invite Tim Devlin from Legislative Council to just tell us what's on the page.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Chair. For the record, my name is Tim Devlin, Legislative Counsel. Before you, you have H-178, a bill that relates to professions and occupations, notary public exemptions. This purpose of this bill is introduced is really to add persons employed by the Vermont Department of Corrections to the list of persons who can be commissioned as notaries public, perform notarial acts within the scope of their official duties, and exempt those people from all regular requirements for notaries public. You will see, just quickly going through the bill, there's really only 2 amendments. First appears on the bottom of page 3, which adds the Department of Corrections to an already enumerated list of other departments that are exempt. And then also some degendering amendments for at the top of page 3, changing he or she to the person. And I believe that is it. The date is to become effective upon passage. I'm happy to do a line-by-line read through if you'd like.
I don't think that'll be necessary at this point. I think what we'll do for expediency is to, and since we're running late and appreciating his patience, is invite Commissioner Demmel to come up and talk to us a little bit, tee this up. And if we have more questions, we'll bring you back. Thanks, Tim. Commissioner, please take the hot seat. Be with us today.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
So tell us a little bit about the context for why H-178 and what the department's position is on it.
Sure. So thank you again. My name is Nick Demmel. I'm the Commissioner of the Vermont Department of Corrections. Heard your last testimony. That sounded a bit complicated. So hopefully we keep this very simple and straightforward for you. The law outlines a number of exemptions for notaries who are performing their duties largely as state employees or as local law enforcement. And I think simply there was an oversight at the time that didn't include the Department of Corrections, which is ultimately the state's largest justice organ with nearly 1,000 staff. We have just over 1,300 incarcerated individuals in the state this morning, and well over 3,000 individuals on community supervision who are managed by our 12 probation and parole offices, which are geographically dispersed around the state. Many of the individuals that are served by our system are justice involved. All of them are justice involved, and many are involved in many other aspects of our justice system, which necessitate official documents, court paperwork, and a slew of other notary needs. So the department frequently relies on our staff as notaries, both at the central office, in each of our 6 prisons, and in all 12 of our district offices. And so this would really alleviate a large burden on the need to take the continuing learning requirements, to pay fees, to maintain those certifications. And particularly at a time when we have a robust staffing problem, it's difficult for our staff to peel away. Many of our staff are doing multiple duties in addition to their assigned duties. And so if we can keep the burdens of this work as minimal as possible, I think that'd be certainly a positive outcome for our system and for the folks that we're serving. But if there's specific questions, I'd be happy to dig into any piece of this. And I'll pause there.
So the idea here is that there are already law enforcement agencies, fish and wildlife, motor vehicles, where persons employed as officers or are just automatically able to be notaries by virtue of their employment there.
So they become a notary, and then there's requirements of non-official notaries, not state government notaries, that they have to go through additional training on an annual basis, pay fees. Those are exempted for state employees who fit under this criterion. So we're simply asking DOC to be included in that list.
Representative.
So I think I'm hearing you right. If I'm not, I apologize if I missed it. But so you're looking to get like your parole officers, COs, those kind of folks able to facilitate stuff for the 1,300 and 3,000 respectively audience of inmates and those some level of outside supervision.
Yeah, I think the folks who would probably most take advantage of this offering are caseworkers who are preparing people for release from the prison into the community, because they prepare a lot of documentation for those individuals. Probation parole officers, as you highlighted, administrative staff in our business office or the business offices of our 12 district offices. Those are the key demand signals I can see from our staff needing this opportunity.
But the COs know then?
Probably not.
I just didn't know because of their direct interface. Like, hey, I can notarize that document. You've got to get to, but no.
Probably not.
I got it. That makes sense based on what you just said. Thank you.
Representative.
Hey, so you just threw out administrative people, like people that are working in an office that aren't employed in law enforcement capacity.
So there's no law enforcement capacity in the Department of Corrections. In the state of Vermont.
Well, the P&P people have some degree of.
Yes, that's right. So there is limited arrest powers of probation and parole officers for individuals under their supervision. That's right. But the law enforcement powers of the state do not extend to the Department of Corrections.
That's the way I was reading this originally, that it was specifically to. Then DCF doesn't either, so.
Right. And that was, we were trying to understand why the department wasn't included in the first place. And law enforcement, we could understand sometimes there is a misconception that the Department of Corrections is a law enforcement agency. But then we saw our sister agency and the Agency of Human Services and the Department of Children and Families, and we're further confused and perplexed why we were not included.
Any other questions for the commissioner? All right. Anything else you want to tell us about this?
That's all.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Feel free to stick around. So I'm going to bring up Deputy Secretary Hibbert for feedback from OPR in the Secretary of State's office. Thanks for being with us again.
Thank you. Nice to be here. I'm going to be looking at my phone just because that's where I have a draft of the bill, so I apologize for that. For the record, Lauren Hibbert, Deputy Secretary of State. It's okay. I'm good. He was offering his computer, which was a very kind offer. Thank you for having me here today. So the history of the exemptions, which is for law enforcement as a broad category, and then employees. If you look at the bill, if you look at page 2, section B, it's law enforcement related. Persons employed as law enforcement officers who are certified under 20 VSA chapter 151, who are non-certified constables, semicolon, we love those semicolons, or who are employed by a Vermont law enforcement agency, the Department of Public Safety, Fish and Wildlife, Motor Vehicles, Liquor and Lottery, addition of corrections here, children and families, the enumerated list. So when notaries transferred to the Office of Professional Regulation, we talked a lot about the different exemptions and who should be registered under our office. We looked at what the functions were of every department and who really needed to be notarizing. And let me just say, from a broad stroke, we have no objection to the inclusion of this. The only piece that I remember from the conversation was we looked at what Department of Corrections was actually using notarization for and made an assessment that they could use notaries far fewer than they are on their current forms. But this exception is fine. The only thing that we have been working with state agencies is just to look at when they're requiring forms to be notarized and when they're not. And it may be in release situations that certain things need to be notarized in order for the process to work smoothly. But if it is a standard form by an official state employee, from our perspective, it doesn't need to be notarized. It's really a third-party document that needs to be notarized. So I think sometimes we run into situations where there's a miscommunication or misalignment of when something needs to be notarized. And we are happy to continue that conversation with the Department of Corrections to make sure that the notarizations are happening because they're required, that there's not an additional burden on the corrections team. But on whole, no objection to this inclusion of the exemptions. And the guidance that we provide is people need to put their title and their full title and their name on the notarization so that it's trackable. And the limitation on this is if you are providing notary services in your official capacity, you are prohibited from providing notarial acts in any other time in your life. You can only do it when you're acting in your official capacity, but then if you want to notarize for a friend on a weekend, you need to become a notary. Just to be clear, it's just in your official capacity in your job. And that's why we believe, and our guidance is that you should put your full name and your full title on the document with the notarization.
All right, that is important. Representative Higley and then
Just one question. So these folks are not required to even keep a log?
They're not required to keep a log. They're not on our website. They're just doing it under their official title.
Okay. Thanks.
So 180 people hanging around here that got that authority would only be able to do that authority in legislative matters.
Yes, but I would fight you on that exemption. I'm just kidding. I said I would fight you on that exemption. Yes. It would seem like some self-dealing.
I don't think you're the last person to threaten to fight one of us.
Sorry, that wasn't a real threat. Just for the record, we recorded, it wasn't a real threat.
We take her more seriously.
Yeah, we're punchy here.
I am too. I'm sorry.
Representative Waters.
Thank you. I have a quick question. Would there be a downside to something being notarized if it didn't need to be?
I think the notarization process is cumbersome. That is the downside. And it is a little bit of confusion. It creates confusion around authentically necessary documents that need to be notarized. So it creates some gray space of does this need to be notarized or not? And so we are trying to work with our state partners to make sure that there is clarification on what types of forms documents need to be notarized versus which ones do not, because it's complicated.
Did you say no problem with corrections being on this list? And
No problem.
having those folks do this. But in addition, we also could probably save them some time and energy by taking a look at the documents that they're currently notarizing and saying, do we really?
It's just an offer. And I just met the commissioner, as you all saw, I just shook his hand and introduced myself. So it's a conversation that can continue. And I'm just trying to make sure that we can do that. But I don't think that needs to be added to this bill. I don't think there's any barrier to this bill moving as written. It's a good exemption.
So committee. Any other questions for Deputy Secretary Hibbard? So here's where my brain is at. It is almost 4:30. We had a pretty intense conversation this afternoon about our previous bill. Tomorrow afternoon, I am told that floor is not going to be super long. That promise has been broken in the past, but I'm being optimistic here. What I would like us to do, especially since Representative Murwicki had to leave for another meeting, is I would like to take a look at this overnight. If anybody has any questions, great. But if not, we could vote this out toward the end of the day tomorrow. Unless there's any objection to that.
Straightforward.
So that's the plan, just so everybody knows. We have done a lot of good work and had some good discussions today. We'll see. I think I was hearing some chatter about our previous bill that we may be able to see some language to help clarify and reduce confusion in an upcoming draft. So maybe we'll take that up on Thursday, but we'll come back to 178 tomorrow afternoon after we are done our work on H270 for the day. I think that is it for our work today. Deputy Secretary Hayward, thank you so much for being with us.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
So committee, any questions just about the agenda? Anything that I should be aware of? We're doing a lot this week. Get sleep. Drive very safely if you're driving anywhere like me.
You too.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody, for the hard work today. We'll
Thank you.